sure to turn off your video at the same time your microphone during this 2 hours of period, except of course the speakers, so that we can ensure a better, smoother internet connection, and so that we don't have any technical difficulties. So please make sure to turn off your microphone and video all the time. And then obviously during the process, if you have any questions and comments, please use the text box or chat box which is on the left side of the slide. You'll be able to see the text box, I think, everyone. So feel free to share your comments and questions. We will we'll note them down and we'll address them at the end of the webinar. Yeah, I hope everyone is able to hear us and see us. And if there's any issue, also you can send a text message to the chat box or send an email to our staff who might be able to help with some technical difficulties in case.
Somebody's ready.
Okay, that's great. Maybe too loud. I hope it's not. Okay, great. Looks like everything is, yeah. Okay, I can see some comments. Good. So maybe we can start. It's 2:31 here, Bangkok time. Thank you very much for all of you taking your time to join this webinar we're organizing at UNESCO Bangkok office. So I think I will just go straight to hand over to Ms. Maki Hayashikawa, the chief of our section for inclusive quality education at UNESCO Bangkok, to officially open the webinar.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much, Nadia, and good afternoon from Bangkok to everyone online. Maybe some of you maybe slightly still in the morning or in the late afternoon. My name is Maki. I'm the section chief for inclusive quality education, and a big greetings from you, to you from Bangkok, and thank you very much for joining this seminar. This is actually the third NEQMAP webinar for this year in 2018, which of course is supported under the program that is also funded by the Global Partnership for Education. As many of you know that we have been hosting this regional platform, NEQMAP, or the Network on Education Quality Monitoring in Asia Pacific, which was launched in 2013, has been organized this webinar since 2016. As main focus of our NEQMAP work, we work in capacity building, research, and knowledge sharing, and we're very happy to be able to share one of our latest knowledge based on our research, which is titled Culture of Testing. I hope many of you have been able to access the study itself. You will see on the screen the cover page of the study. And this study was actually building on UNESCO's efforts on the series of Rethinking Education, which was produced in 2015. And we are trying to re-examine the quality of education issues, what this means for learning, and we have actually focused our regional study on the theme of cultural testing, looking at socio-cultural impacts on learning and why societies across the region, especially in our region, Asia Pacific, still place considerable emphasis on tests and examinations. So this report, which was published earlier this year, comes really timely, and we're very happy to share the findings to the NEQMAP members and also a wider audience who are interested in this topic. So we are joined by 3 speakers today. There's no sound. Woohoo! Hello. Everyone is okay? Somebody does not hear me? Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Chan. Oh, good. Okay. So if anyone who cannot...
Can you rejoin? Rejoin the meeting?
Yeah, I could just go on. If anyone cannot hear, please just poke us. We're very happy. We have 3 speakers for this webinar. One is, of course, my colleague, Mark Mans, who actually led the regional study. And we'll be sharing with you the key messages and findings from the study. And we're also very pleased to have 2 international experts who are joining us virtually and our appreciation for your time in joining us. One is Dr. Cecilia Chan. She's the head of professional development and associate professor at the Center for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning at the University of Hong Kong. Dr. Chan has conducted research on topics such as the development and assessment of generic competencies, assessment in engineering education, and has been involved in over 40 research projects worldwide. Our second speaker is Dr. Wei Xin Leong, and he is the Assistant Dean of Degree Program and Student Life at the National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technological University in Singapore, and which is also a NEQMAP member institution. Dr. Leong currently teaches undergraduate, graduate, and executive leadership and professional development courses on curriculum planning and implementation, assessment literacy, formative assessment, and reflective practices. So they will be sharing with us their reflection and thoughts on the cultural testing report, as well as their perspective or experiences in respective countries and jurisdictions around this topic as well. So I really thank the two speakers for accepting our invitation and being able to join us today for this webinar. So I hope this webinar will be very interactive and hope to engage everyone who are linked in today. Please feel free to share your thoughts and comments and questions during the webinar. And as Nadia mentioned earlier, it will be very helpful for us if you could actually provide your comments and question on the chat box so we can also get back to you in a timely manner. So with that, I hope you enjoyed the webinar, and let me hand over this back to Nadia.
Yes, thank you very much, Maki-san, for that introduction. Just before I move on, those who are not able to probably hear or see us, can you rejoin? Can you try rejoining the Skype so that it might change? Because it seems like in general, most of the people are able to hear or see us, it seems. Okay. So before we move on, let me quickly take you through the agenda of today's 2-hour program. So we're just in the process of introduction of this webinar, and after this, we will have 3 presenters, each giving a presentation on the respective topic. The first presenter will be Mark Mans, our colleague from UNESCO Bangkok. He is the author of this culture of testing study we launched last year and completed this year. So he will be sharing with you all the key message and findings we got from this particular study. And after that, we will be joined by our 2 external experts in assessment, Dr. Cecilia and Dr. Wei Xin. So they will be reacting to the culture of testing study, and also at the same time, we're hoping that they will also share their specific country's experience related to the study. As some of you might know, who have read the study report or who are familiar with the study, that neither Hong Kong nor Singapore are actually part of this region study. So we thought it maybe might be interesting actually to see to bring in experts who are not part of the study, but then who can bring in additional viewpoints on this particular topic. Then after the 3 presenters, each I think will take around 20 minutes. We will open the floor to the to everyone, to public, for about 30 minutes to receive your questions and to respond to questions and comments. And respond to them. And that's basically an agenda for today. Okay, let me just check. And then again, sorry, before we're moving on to the main agenda, we would like to give you a snapshot of what we've done in leading up to this webinar. So starting from, I think, the week before, we started using our social media, particularly Facebook, to create a discussion around this topic on culture of testing. And we did what we call Facebook poll. And at the same time, we also did some discussion on certain topics. So if I just share the summary of it, we did a very quick poll with the question said, do you think the exam measure learning effectively? And around 68 people responded to this particular question. And interestingly, most of them, or as you can see, 67% of them actually saying no. So I think it's a very interesting result. Yet in our actually Asia Pacific region is very much exam oriented. has exam-oriented culture, but yet many people still think that probably the exam is not the best way to measure, or not efficient or effective way to measure the students' knowledge. I'm getting confused here. And we also try to create some discussions around the topic, and got some reactions from our some of the participants or NEQMAP members. And here are just the snapshot of from the Facebook itself. So, for example, if I just read it through, for example, Mr. Tintin from Bhutan said the test is actually just the tools of assessment used for both continuous and summative assessment of learning. So it can cover both cognitive and practical parameters of learning. However, the test itself has a very negative connotation and stigma in Bhutan. And I continued this conversation with Mr. Tintin, and they said he said that this negative connotation and stigma usually comes from the fact that students and parents still perceive that test is mainly used for the promotional purpose. And I think his comment is also supported by his colleagues' again comment, which is just down below, which interestingly said the tests that stands for tension, erring, and sick, and tricky, and short-term benefit. I will find it interesting. And he also says the test promotes teacher-oriented instructions. As a result, it leads to rote learning and mugging facts and figures. I think these factors, again, seem to be supported by other colleagues from Nepal, who says that people tend to concentrate only on the score of the exam. They don't care much about the learning. So somehow the teaching learning process mainly focuses on only exam, on the test or the questions itself. Again, Arjun from Bhutan said a very interesting comment saying, in the midst of changing our education system and socioeconomic transformation, the stereotype testing system is increasingly become irrelevant. So we're talking about 21st century skills. At the same time, we're still measuring the 20th century skills. Actually, I find this comment particularly interesting because we had our global monitoring report, I think 2015, report showed this global survey result, which shows that in most of the countries, actually in many countries, the people are still just testing the knowledge, the content. Very much, we still, though we are talking about 21st century and the importance of it a lot, we still tend to, our assessment or tests tend to focus on assessing the knowledge or the content, more curriculum-based knowledge, more testing like the traditional subjects like maths, languages, and science, etc., but not much focus on what we call 21st century skills such as problem solving, creative thinking, on problem collaboration, etc. So I thought that was a very relevant comment. And he also says there's lots of debate happening in Bhutan, and they are even thinking of foregoing a test system till grade 6. So I believe they do have an assessment in the primary level. And there's it seems like a strong political will, and it seems like it's going to be implemented. And I also find it interesting because I think in many countries, again, there's an ongoing debate, and some say the test at the early grade is important to identify if there is any issue, so that we can react quicker, so that the learning process will be more effective in the later age. But at the same time, there are also arguments saying that, well, obviously testing at that early age, it just gives this unnecessary tension and stress to the students. So I think there's lots of debates and arguments around this area, and some countries obviously follow. For example, like Bhutan may be thinking this is more stressful and better to avoid it in early grade. I think the similar thing happened in Mongolia. So I think it was just interesting to hear and what our participants are thinking and what the countries are doing in this. So I would like to again thank for all those who actively participated in the discussion and sharing your thoughts. So I think with this we can, yep. So I think with this, the introduction part is over. Sorry it took more than we expected. So without then further ado, I would like to invite Mark Mans to share his presentation with us.
Maybe I'll switch seats.
Okay.
Okay. Apologies, everyone. We had a little technical difficulty getting my PowerPoint presentation loaded. Thank you very much to Maki and to Nadia for the introduction and for the background on examinations and the culture of testing. Let me just get right into it. Well, and actually before that, I want to thank all the researchers that we produced the report, and all the colleagues and external people that we had review the report and helped us put it out earlier this year. It was launched in, I believe, May, but this is actually our first sort of real launching. We haven't had a chance to sort of disseminate it widely and talk about it in more detail, so we're very happy to have this opportunity today to talk about some of the results. So, first off, what is a culture of testing? There's a definition here that states a culture in which high-stakes standardized testing is accepted as a foundational practice in education and shapes how education is understood in society and used by its stakeholders. So this goes to what some of the comments that people had shared on Facebook and to what Nadia was alluding to earlier about this importance that we place on examinations and high-stakes examinations in particular, which led us to conduct this study in the first place. So to design the test, we wanted to examine what exactly these manifestations of this culture of testing were, and then to examine the sociocultural factors between education and examinations. And a lot of this comes with the well-known fact that East Asian countries tend to do very well at international assessments and spend a lot of time preparing for college entrance examinations. So we wanted to see and compare and contrast across different cultures and societies in Asia and Pacific to see what exactly was going on. And then, of course, we wanted to examine how this culture of testing is both shaped and shaped by education policies. So we had 9 countries involved in the study: Bangladesh, Fiji, India, Japan, Kazakhstan, Republic of Korea, Philippines, Tonga, and Vietnam. Researchers in each country carried out desk studies and primary data collection through surveys, focus groups, and in some cases interviews with all students, teachers, and parents. Of course, the sample sizes ranged. I think the minimum sample size we had was 100 students, 30 parents, 30 teachers. But in one case, I believe it was the Philippines, we had over 5,000 students. And the students came from both public and private schools and in both urban and rural areas. So a wide variation in the sample sizes. So the results are not directly comparable, but give us sort of a snapshot of some of the occurrences and indications of a culture of testing in each country. I hope you can read this. It's a bit blurry on my screen, but just to start off, we wanted to sort of highlight what the purpose of examinations were and what we were looking at in our study. So of course, 3 different purposes were identified. One is for selection, which means controlling access to a new level of education. Second purpose is accountability, sort of measurement and evaluating the effectiveness of education. And the third is a certification. So for example, using it to show completion of high school or college or junior high school, for example. And the 3 most common points of a high-stakes examination are at the end of primary. So for example, at the end of grade 6 or class 6, at the end of lower secondary, so class 8 or class 9, and then at the end of upper secondary, so completion of high school. Those are the main entry points. And for this study, most of the research focused on secondary education high-stakes examinations. So either at the end of high school or at the end of lower secondary. Again, I hope you can read some of this information here. One of the first things we asked the students, parents, and teachers was how often they had a test or an examination. In most cases, a large percentage of people reported that they have it once or twice a semester, And of course, a semester can vary between country. But, and this was reporting per class or per subject, so once or twice per semester. The interesting thing to note was, though, that across countries, the number of subjects ranges quite significantly. So, for example, in some cases in high school, students only had to have 5 subjects, whereas in Japan, Republic of Korea, and Vietnam, they all had 9 or 10 subjects. So even though the number or the frequency of testing may not vary that much, once or twice per semester, if you double the number of subjects that you have to take each semester, that can significantly increase the burden to a student for facing examinations. We also wanted to ask students how often or how many hours they spent studying. And not just studying in general, but studying for a test or for an examination, and both inside the classroom and outside the classroom. I hope you can see, and if you can't, please take a look at the report when you get a chance. But the one that points the biggest notice is Bangladesh, where a significant portion of the students indicated that they spent 7 or more hours per week, both inside class and outside class, studying for examinations. Some of the other countries indicated more or less yes or no, 1 or 2 hours or 3 or 4 hours, but Bangladesh stood out in that regard, as well as Vietnam. A lot of people indicated that 7 or more hours outside of class they spent studying for an examination. Could I get that water? Sorry. And some other interesting trends from this hours of studying was, of course, logically and not surprisingly, the number of hours studying for exams increases as students progress. So students in high school obviously are spending more time studying for exams than students at lower levels. But the trend too was interesting, where females reported studying much more, both inside and outside of the class for tests, as well as rural students studying more both inside and outside the class for tests. And I'll come back to this trend 3 in a few minutes when I talk about some of the other interesting findings. Lastly, we asked students, parents, teachers, whether they thought there were too many tests. We wanted to get a sense of their perception of whether or not this culture of testing was reaching them. So you can see the various different answers there, hopefully, and if you can't, please take a look in the book. But some of the more interesting results were, for example, in Kazakhstan, where the number of teachers significantly disagreed that there were too many tests. In the Philippines, there was an inverse response from the teachers to what the students and parents said. Teachers said yes, there were, and students and parents said no, there weren't. And then Vietnam, more people responded that yes, there were too many examinations. And then, of course, in Tonga, most people, especially the parents, identified that there were not too many examinations. So now, some of the key findings that we found regarding the socio-cultural implications. One of the main impacts was social mobility and economic opportunity, as well as the social, cultural, and family expectations or factors that exist in each country. Some of the implications for learning included this increased in competition, which can lead to, for example, higher stress and anxiety, not just of students, but of other stakeholders. The result that this has on teaching and the curriculum, for example, narrowing the curriculum and teaching to the test, and then the relationship between testing and policy. So I'll go into these just a little bit more detail. Social mobility, when we asked students what they thought the main purpose of the examination was, most of them indicated progression or a career path. So you can see 89% in India, 94% Tonga, 100% Fiji. that was the number one factor for the purpose of an examination, or for these high stakes examinations. This would lead them to a better future. And so students and families strive for better courses or education tracks, better schools, and better economic and employment opportunities. And so this sort of brings back that point I made earlier about people in rural areas wanting to study more, because this sort of gives them motivation for this social mobility, gives them an opportunity. If they can study hard enough to get into a good university, they can improve their situations, move to an urban area. Social and family expectations are very important across all countries, not just the Confucian East Asian countries that we examined. Family pride, honor, prestige, the concept of face, which is prevalent in Asian societies, and reputation. This ranges from, for example, in the Pacific Islands, Fiji and Tonga, indicating where they have festivals and communities celebrate, and it brings a lot of community pride to people who do well in an examination. Family support and this idea of tiger parenting is also very well known, where parents spend a lot of time, money, and effort to do everything that they can to make sure that their child succeeds. For example, private tutoring and coaching. 90% of students in Bangladesh indicated that they attend private tutoring classes after regular classes. This is also prevalent in many other countries, such as Republic of Korea, Japan, and many others across the region. And then this idea of hard work and diligence as a virtue, this legacy brought down from society and cultures, that if you work hard, you can succeed. These are very important concepts that impact how societies and how families create expectations for the children to succeed in examinations. Some of these other social and cultural legacies that we examine in the report, of course, the Confucian heritage, which sort of gave birth to these high stakes entrance exams back in the, I think it's the Qing dynasty in China. This led to the creation of social hierarchy and using education and examinations to sort of create and sustain social hierarchy. Another important legacy across Asia Pacific is a colonial legacy. For example, in the Pacific, the legacy of colonialism there is very important. The church is also very important in those places, and the Philippines, which places a strong role, or did play a strong role in education from the beginning. All of these lead to this notion of examinations or testing as a tradition, something that is passed on from generation to generation and that is celebrated. Some of these people, when in the report and in the case studies that we examined, a lot of commentary was talking about in the past and their memories of taking an examination. And while it is a hardship and while there are negative aspects to it, it's almost a badge of honor that you are able to take part in these traditions. And so therefore I term it also as almost a rite of passage that people have to go through in order to belong to a certain group or a certain category within society. This plays a very important role in how the society and cultures frame the relevance and effectiveness of tests. Across the board, in most of the countries through our study, students, teachers, and parents agreed that tests were positive, were effective, and were very objective tools. So this sort of brings out the idea that examinations are trustworthy. And this trust and this positive perception can have a significant impact on how cultures, societies relate towards examinations. But there are some impacts for learning. All this focus on examinations and scores and success has an impact on learning, and one of the biggest ones is the increase in competition. As I said, not just students, but also parents, teachers, and schools in general. Of course, Students will compete for different awards or scholarships, placements in schools, and of course, ultimately for employment. But parents compete as well. This idea of tiger parenting, doing anything they can for their child to succeed, because if the child succeeds, then the family succeeds, and parents want to compete for status just as much as everybody else. Teachers will compete to get the best scores for their students if this is linked to evaluation or appraisals and salary, and schools will also do this if better school results in examinations leads to more funding for their school. All of these create stress, anxiety. It can lead to corruption and cheating, and as we mentioned earlier, a significant increase in private tutoring and what is termed shadow education, an education system beyond the public, nationally controlled education system. As I mentioned earlier, the impact on teaching and curriculum is significant because teachers will often simplify and narrow the curriculum to only what is going to be covered on the test, i.e. teachers teaching to the test. This can leave out a lot of information and subject content that is placed in curriculums, but teachers, if they don't deem they have enough time to cover everything, eventually will throw out lesson plans and just prepare students for tests. Also, this impacts their teachers' reputation and evaluation, so they will focus on trying to do the best, just providing the relevant content. And then we also asked countries, students, teachers, and parents about alternative methods for assessments. So for example, class-based, school-based assessments. And there was some mixed results indicated from some of the countries. In some cases, national education systems have tried to introduce class-based assessments or school-based assessments, but the rollout has been incomplete or unsuccessful due to a number of factors. One mainly being that there's a lack of assistance or preparation for the teachers in order to actually do the class-based assessments properly. Teachers then do not have the confidence to fully evaluate students or their classes based on these methods. And so teachers often complain that they prefer the old standardized examination methods as opposed to these new methods, just because there's too much new information that they can't handle without a proper training and rollout by the government. So all of this goes back to the relationship between policy, examinations, and the perception. So before I was talking about this trust that builds up with how people perceive examinations. So if that public perception is strong, then it's going to impact how your education policy and your education plan, your curriculum, and your pedagogy is laid out. In some countries, so for example, Fiji, India, Republic of Korea, Japan, they've all seen a reduction or an elimination of some exam at some point in the education system in the last 5 to 10 years. Some of these were successful, others were not, because what it led to was a distrust amongst public perception on the learning objectives and learning outcomes. So for example, I remember the example of India, where they eliminated some of the examinations, but parents and teachers began to complain that students were not studying enough in school. They didn't feel that they were doing enough in the classrooms, so the government went back and started to reintroduce examinations. The same case was for Fiji as well, where they indicated that they eliminated some examinations and put in some class-based assessments, but the teachers were uncomfortable with how those class-based assessments were utilized. And so people lobbied to reintroduce examinations again. So again, the public perception plays a very strong role in how examinations will be utilized within the education system. And finally, some of the recommendations from the report. If we want to eliminate some of the negative aspects of these examinations, the increased competition, the stress and anxiety, the cheating. We have to look at what exactly learning is and quality education is, and promote a balanced and holistic education that emphasizes relevance and effectiveness, and not just a score on an examination. In addition, we need to improve classroom strategies for the evaluation of transversal competencies, the 21st century skills and soft skills, as was mentioned prior to my presentation in the discussion. This will need to be accompanied by effective assessment frameworks for these school-based assessments. And importantly, providing more resources for teachers to be able to accommodate these different methods and different styles, rather than just simply focusing on standardized tests. And the last one, limiting the influence of rankings, national, subnational, international, all types of rankings. Many people want to score the best, but at what cost? Are we leaving something out when we're just looking at a high score? So we want to limit the influence of these rankings and go back to balancing this holistic education, or balancing assessment of learning with assessment for learning. And that concludes my presentation on the culture of testing. If you haven't gotten a copy of the report, please take a look online. You can find it on our website. There's a link there on your screen. Please download it. I hope you read it, hope you enjoy it, and if you have comments and questions for us, we'll be happy to discuss further. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Mark, for this great presentation, which is obviously very informative, at the same time very relevant, very relevant topic, particularly to Asia Pacific region. So I know we're gonna have this question and answer session at the end of it, but then there's one particular question which I think require very short answers. I'll just pose it to you. So Devaram from Nepal is asking, what's tiger parenting?
Tiger parenting, this was a term coined by, I believe, the researcher in the United States to characterize, and it was talking within the context of the United States when it was framed, but there's a notion that Asian parents within the United States spend much more time and much more effort on helping their children succeed. That includes extra lessons in music, extra lessons in extracurricular activities, other sports, music, and extra private tutoring classes in order to be the best and the top student in every class. And so it goes into look at what are the factors that make parents strive to do this sort of tiger parenting. And perhaps our speaker from Hong Kong will allude to some of that in her presentation next.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So we have a couple of more questions, but I think we can pose that at the end when the question and answer session is open. So I think because those questions might require a little more elaborate answers. So then without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Cecilia to give her presentation. Cecilia, are you there?
Hi.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great.
Okay, your presentation is loading here.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah. Oops.
You guys can see me, right? Because I cannot see myself.
We know your video is not. We can't see you.
Okay, I can see the presentation, and you cannot see me at the moment. Okay. Try it again.
Your presentation is still loading on our side. Okay, it's up now. Yeah, we can see your presentation now.
Can you see me?
Not you, but your presentation.
Grand. Okay. Okay. Is that working? Hello?
Yes. We
okay.
We can hear you and see your presentation, but unfortunately we cannot see your.
Oh, maybe it's
maybe
okay.
There you are.
Oh, I
yes.
can see me.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you very much, Lydia, for introducing, and thank you, Mark, and the whole UNESCO group to invite me, and thank you, Maki, for introducing me as well. Just want to say hello to all the Hong Kong people out there and everybody, actually. I'm not used to use webinar, right? Usually it's like, keynote face-to-face, so I do use hand gestures, so just ignore me if I do. Yeah, this is actually very interesting. Even hearing Mark, presentation, it kind of brings me back, like about, some of the report in the book, it is very interesting in terms of, Tiger Mom, the culture, and also all the social. And in my presentation, we'll talk a little bit about that, and especially more talking about, why do we want to test people? I think that's probably what I'd like to put the idea across. Mark mentioned that maybe our Hong Kong speaker will talk a bit more about Tiger Mom, Tiger Dad, right? So here's one of them. Here I am. I am probably, according to my children, my 3 children, a Tiger Mom, right? And this is to do with culture. We do kind of get them to study a lot, and trying to get them to go to tutorial, although my kids are not really going to them. They refuse, they're a bit liberal that way. And this is kind of like the culture in Hong Kong. Let me begin with my presentation. Now, there are some fundamental questions that we need to answer when we talk about testing or the culture of testing. And I think the first one is, what type of student are we looking to nurture? Okay, what are we looking for from our students? So what are we trying to get from them? What are the actual outcomes? What is, if we are going to teach them from, say, primary school or even kindergarten all the way to university, what are we looking for? So, and what type of student do testing nurture? Is what we are looking for and what testing brings us actually align? I think that's the important point. And I think some of you already have an idea, and from Mark's report as well, you have an idea what we are trying to demolish or, get rid of. And if we are actually using testing, would you be proud if this is the type of children that you spend your time nurturing, either as a teacher or as a parent? Now think of it, most of us here are probably researcher, teacher, principals, and different type of academic person. But some of you are also parents. What do you want, right, if you are a parent? If you are a parent, what do you want your child to grow up to be? I don't think most of you will say, I just want my child to be rich and famous. Okay, I think most of you will say, I want my child to be happy. I want him to be successful, but happy and healthy. Okay, so it kind of brings back to, what are the outcomes? What do you want them to be? And when it comes to, the society and our employers, right? I got some of these magazines and newspaper. What do they want? Well, if you look at it this way, they're looking for things like leadership skills, okay, cognitive skills, improve the communication skills. You can see what our employers want, right? You can see good communication skills, flexible, punctual, positive attitude, hardworking, creative, team player. We are hiring people who can think out of the box. And look at this, one computer engineer who likes solve difficult problems. You can see from the telephone number, they actually have to solve the equation in order to get the number below. And soft skills are needed for all different type of sectors. And this is something that we need to think about, right? So if we want our children to be happy, okay, and also at the same time successful, is testing really the way to go by. Now, and of course, Mark already mentioned this as well. We know assessment drives everything, right? It drives the way we learn. It drives everything that we do, okay? Because we want that piece of paper at the end of the day. In fact, it even drives the software platform that we use in university and school, okay? So It's a very important thing. And if testing is the way we're going to use, what is its drivers? So looking back at the whole learning outcome again. Now, to me, I think these are very important. I call it holistic competence and virtue. So it's generic skills like creativity, sensitivity, leadership, respect, intercultural understanding, appreciation, brainstorming, lifelong learning, manners, confidence. And we have things like, more, to do with the affective learning and their attitude and values, like ethical, resilience. Now, resilience is a really interesting factor. In fact, OECD is actually now looking at resilience. How are we actually measuring resilience? Okay, and because in Hong Kong, apparently our students have very high academic resilience. Okay, but that's not true when it comes to normal resilience. When I mean academic resilience, I'm talking about that, they might come from not a very good background, but they still do well in academic. Okay, but it's only talking about the academic. But what about outside of academic? Do they also do well? Because we do have a very high teenager commit suicidal rate as well. So this is something that maybe we haven't successfully taught or developed our students, or have the opportunity to develop our students. So there are things like professionalism, adaptability, common sense. Every time I look at this word common sense, people would go, yes, common sense, which are not very common anymore, obviously. Positive attitude. We need students who have positive attitude, because with positive attitude, they were able to conquer a lot of things. And critical thinking, consideration, and openness. Now, if I am a mother, right? If I'm the mother of 3, what do I want my children to become? Well, I would like them to have a lot of these competencies. And I know testing won't allow them to have this, because testing is not able to test any of these particular competencies. So what are we going to do about that? So in university, in school, in education in general, there is a strikingly unbalance in terms of, obviously, our academic knowledge and the holistic competency, which we know is important. All the stakeholders know it's important, society know it's important, employers know it's important, and in general, people think it's important. But how do we test these knowledge then? So back to the question, what are the social and cultural factors that shape a culture of testing? Okay, I thought one of the Facebook, I think it was a Facebook question that Lydia showed, was that I think it was a guy called Arjun. He said, we are trying to develop 21st century skills, but we are still using the old methods, right, measuring 20th century skills. Now, I think that's very, very true and very, very interesting, because we're not changing. We haven't really changed. We have all this technology in front of us. We have all the different type of new approach. We're talking about deep learning. We're talking about active learning. We are talking about, how we need to engage our students, doing student center, all the different terminology, formative assessment, assessment for learning, assessment as learning. But at the same time, we are still using old traditional testing. And of course, the question is what else can we use? Okay, in terms of social and cultural factors, how does that shape the testing? Now, I can probably talk in terms of Hong Kong, okay, because this is where I am at the moment. Hong Kong, in general, are very like Confucius that Mark mentioned, right? We believe in books, you find your gold, okay? At least most parents believe in this. And they worship hardworking, it's a domination here, and they pursue perfect academic achievement. Now, when I mean perfect academic achievement, I really mean perfect. I mean 100%, A star, A+, that's perfect. And, if they're not perfect, right, then, there's a bit of problem. Let me mention, primary school in Hong Kong, 60% or under is a fail, okay? which I think is quite high. 60% under is to fail. Okay, so are we pushing our students quite hard in that case? Some of the education, primary school and secondary school, they also do negative marking. Okay, so that means if you are incorrect in your spellings, in your dictation, especially in Chinese, which is quite difficult, and they reduce mark, okay, from 100, okay, rather than add marks to it. And as we educator knows, like negative marking is always not an encouraging sense for, well, for our children and probably for the parents as well. And you know, with the above, they think that, you know, if they study well, they do well in school, they have perfect academic achievement, they can survive in the society. So they need to start early. And how early is that? Well, I say it's similar to a lot of these developed Asian countries like Singapore, South Korea. They start when they are still a baby, and we call it win from the beginning. Okay, winning from the beginning. Okay, and when is the beginning? Well, basically, when they are probably in your tummy, and you probably want to start register them to a good kindergarten. Okay, and whatever the kindergarten is, or when they are 1 year old, you want them to start able to read. Okay, so you probably know how to read. Baby sense, right? You probably want your child to be able to read before they can walk. Okay, and I know this sounds crazy because I grew up in Ireland, right? And they don't do it like that there. Okay, so before they can walk, they are expected to able to at least say a few alphabets, and that's probably not the right thing to do. So in terms of win from the beginning, so basically, you know, if you go to a good kindergarten, you will then expected able to go to a good primary school. And then if you're able to go to a good primary school, you're likely to get into a good secondary school. And in a good secondary school, you're likely to able to get into a good university in Hong Kong or elsewhere. Now, we also have the problem in Hong Kong that only half of our students who ever sit the secondary high-stake exam would get into university or higher education. Okay, that includes private institution and everything else. We only have 8 public higher education institutions in Hong Kong. Okay, and so half of them will not get into. They have to look elsewhere, other country, other private, you know, or other things in general. Now this is newspaper, right? I know I kind of copied it I got this kind of script, right, from a newspaper. It was in Chinese, so I actually translate into English. Parents these days, they are all literate. Some of them are even highly educated. The kids they raise learn a dozen of languages, proficient in creative arts and even martial arts. They got hundreds of certificates, yet none of them is about learning to be a person in this society. Okay, and again, let me kind of remind, this is the culture that we are living in Hong Kong. Okay, and parents want to, I don't know, collect a lot of certificates, right? Because if they have a lot of certificates, they can use them to go to a good primary school or good kindergarten. Okay, so when a child is like 2 or 3 years old, and they probably started playing piano already, and different hobbies, like and different play group classes in English, in Mandarin, in Cantonese, right? And maybe even in a foreign language. This is actually very normal in Hong Kong. And I know it does sound a bit crazy when I actually say it out in a webinar like this, but this is normal in Hong Kong. 8 out of 10 parents will be doing things like that. Okay, so that's very, very normal. And in terms of creative arts, they would actually let them, you know, do drawing, do piano, do things like martial arts, the same, you know. So they have loads of certificates, but none of them really teach them anything. Teach them to be a person. Imagine if you're a child, you know, you have small fingers and you ask them to play piano. It doesn't really make sense. In fact, that culture probably make them hate some of these, some of these hobbies and some of these study, because they've been studying since they're 1. And yeah, so basically, this is the culture that we are in. Now, despite that they have so many certificates, they seem to know a lot of things, but at the same time, they seem to know very little. Okay, they know a lot. They probably know a few languages, more than me or you. But what do they really know? Do they know how to tie their shoelace? Probably not. Okay, and they don't know how to respect people. They don't know how to be creative. They don't have time to be creative. They don't know how to have fun. They do not know how to enjoy and how to entertain themselves. Okay, and whenever they do, they probably play with their phone. And this is the social culture at the moment in Hong Kong. So now, although I've said all those things, and it sounds like, wow, Hong Kong parents are crazy. Hong Kong parents are all tiger mom and dads, right? And maybe that's kind of come across, okay? And maybe it sounds like I'm criticizing parents in Hong Kong. I am not. And it's not really to do with the parents either. And what I actually did was I conduct a large-scale research from 2015 to about 2018 to study the general criteria that parents want to choose, right? Based on the criteria, what kind of primary school would they actually want to choose, okay? And there are about 500 kindergarten in Hong Kong, private and public, and we actually did a questionnaire with 99 kindergarten, so we have big representative at large scale. So parents, I cut the story short. Summary is parents rank child's happiness to be the first criteria when they choose the kindergarten. So basically, they want their children to be happy in that particular kindergarten. That's the most important thing for them. Okay, and school reputation and the conduct, very important as well. That's number 2. And number 3 is teachers qualification and reputation. Okay, and these are the 3 important criteria. And as you can see, and this is out of 16 criteria, we asked them about, how do they drive the teaching? Is it important in terms of what school they are going to go to? All the different type, right? But these are the ones that they choose. So child's happiness, number 1. It sounds funny because, it seems that's what the parents want, but that's not what we are doing. Okay, similarly to another survey that OECD did, right? I think it was 2015. They basically, did a questionnaire about happiness, right? Teenager happiness, and the average of the happiness is 7.3 in different countries, and Hong Kong and some of the other Asian countries that I mentioned before hit the lowest, 6.5. Okay. So our children are not happy, at least, when it comes to teenager years. And I think this is what we need to think about. So if the parents want the children to be happy, right, what are we doing then? What are we doing wrong? What are we doing right? What are we doing? Okay, and I think that's important. And as I mentioned, I'm not criticizing the parents, right? Because I think this is what's happening. Okay, I wrote an article for the Times Education Supplement, and it's basically called Tiger Mom and Dad Driven by the Catch-22 Environment. When I mean Catch-22, what do I really mean? We are stuck, okay? I am as a mother, right? I'm a mother, right? I do not want to push my children every day inside and outside the classroom. I understand that is not the right thing to do. I want them to go out and play. All parents will say that to you. But what exactly is happening is that we are in a situation, okay, that both parents and also schools and institutions we have external pressure, okay? For parents, the external pressures are the school, okay? For the school, the external pressures are actually the society and probably the parents themselves. So if the school do not have good ranking, as Mark mentioned, and or good or people or graduate going to good secondary school or good university, the school would actually be criticized. Okay, so that's not obviously a good thing for the senior management of the school. Now for the parents then, okay, so the school kind of giving a bit of pressure, for the parents. And obviously the parents, say if I said, no, I'm not going to study with my children, I don't really mind, I don't care if they actually don't study, okay, what would actually happen? Well, they become the bottom of the class, but they also know that the people beside them, their friends, right, their parents are actually pushing them, okay, so you are kind of live into this environment. Your child will be the only one left behind, okay. I mean, we talk about no left behind. So do you want your child to left behind in their class? No, you don't. So you are stuck and going, okay, I want my children to be happy, but well, I can't, we just don't have time to be happy, right? Because they have to do outside class as well, because everybody else is doing. So that's what I mean by catch-22 environment. So we are stuck in that catch-22 environment. So yes, audience, I just want to mention I am a very good mother, but I'm stuck in this environment. In terms of Hong Kong assessment, I just did a quick overview if anybody wants to know about it, because the report did not, as Mark mentioned, did not talk about Hong Kong. We have, obviously, we have kindergarten, but we also have 6 primary school years, okay. In year 3, okay, so they will be 6 or 7, they'll be about 7 years old. They have something called a TSA. The TSA is an exam, okay, it's a test, and it's an exam that the government gives. They're only 7 or 8 years old. This was introduced a few years back, and most schools participate in it, especially if you're public school, public government funded school, you have to participate in it. It's not supposed to test the child, okay? It's supposed to test the quality of the school and so forth. But obviously, it doesn't really work out that way, as all ranking and testing happens. Then for secondary school, now you can see I have an old structure here, okay? Sorry, let me go back. I have an old structure here, okay? The old structure happened before 2008, sorry. We have a 3-year undergraduate degree. Now you can see we have 2 high-stake exams. So we have 5-year junior secondary school and 2-year senior secondary school. So it's very similar to the English model, the UK model. So we have the HKCE and the HKALE. And students was streamlined, so they can either do arts or do science subjects. Now we have changed this structure to the new structure because the government want them to have more, to be more broad, right, and rather than just narrow. So they will have to do both arts and science subjects and liberal study and so forth. So there are 3-year junior secondary school and 3 senior secondary school. And instead of having an exam in between, right, obviously each school will have their own test, they will have a public exam for the
Hello, Cecilia? Oh. Hello? Cecilia, sorry, you were out for a while. Can you hear me? Hello, Cecilia?
Lydia?
Sorry. I think it seems like it was error on our side. Sorry about that.
Is it okay? Everybody good?
Not everything is good. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, grand. Okay, so I was just mentioning that in Hong Kong, in secondary school, we also have a school-based assessment. Okay, I know it's a little bit small now. Okay, and we have. Can you all hear me? Sorry, there's a feedback there that before. Is that okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Sorry about that.
Good. No problem. Okay, so you can see, right, it was only introduced not long ago, right, to some of the core subject, and now it's actually going on a bit more. Obviously, you have visual arts, right? Visual arts is 50%. Okay, so 50% of the overall in the 3 years, they will be doing, they will have school-based assessment. And then you have other things like design and applied technology, which is have a high school-based assessment as well. But some of them have only 20%. Now, you might ask, is it a good thing or a bad thing? Do they like it, right? Obviously, Mark already mentioned some of the problems with school-based assessment. So different standard of marking is the biggest thing, you know. Do teachers really know how to mark them? Are they the same for one school and the other? Because there's no uniform, no consistency among them. And also, when I'm thinking, right, as an academic, as a researcher as well, if I were doing school-based assessment, I would have hoped everything would be more formative assessment, continuous, you know. They might, even for Chinese, you know, they, instead of just like doing tests, they would do, you know, nice journal, report, essay, you know, maybe something a bit innovative. Maybe even for oral, they go out and do an interview, right? Something, a video and interview, something like that. That's what I would be thinking as a more innovative assessment method. But I think in school, they are actually counting kind of continuous assessment, but in tests and in, you know, everyday homework, that kind of thing. So that's not really, you know, helping in terms of the school-based assessment. And I think students are both, student and teacher, they both like it and don't like it. There's no like I hate it and there's no I like it. Okay, I think it really depends on the learning style of the student as well. But how do we make it better? Definitely some kind of standard is needed and some kind of training is needed. So of course, right? Just before I finish, what do we really want to assess our student for? I think this is the overall thing that I've been talking about. The aim for assessing should be trying to help our students to develop and improve, and not for producing evidence or measurement. And this is the problem with testing. It seems that, you know, it's always for evidence or always for measurements or always for summative. Now, if we think about in real life, okay, I know sometimes we do tests like aptitude tests, right? But in fairness, how often are we being tested in real life? Okay, so if you have a job, okay, does your boss give you a test and multiple choice and say, let me see if I'm going to give you a raise this year, do this test for me? Nobody does that, right? They look at they observe you, they look at your, you know, your different competence and if you are able to do the job, okay? If you are in university, you know, you want to make friends with your teachers, right? You know, people don't give you a test and go, you can be my friend if you're able to do this MCQ questions, right? Or essay. They just don't do that. People wouldn't do that. They will observe you and go, yeah, I like you, you know, and I want to be your friends. And that is real life. And maybe what we are doing in school, in education, in higher education institute, what we're not really thinking is, what do we want as an outcome? Now, I know it sounds really bad that, you know, wow, so this testing thing is all bad. Not really, right? I actually spent some time looking at different research and blogs in the last few days, right? And there are some good things about testing, okay? The good things are, the gains are perseverance, because you have to actually do a lot of study, so there's perseverance. Hardiness, okay? You have to work extremely hard. Resilience, there's some kind of resilience there, not to give up. Self-control. Ambition, because a lot of students actually, you know, they know that they have to do the test, they will go to the next level. And of course, memory. If we are going to surface learning, then obviously a lot of them are to do with memory. But of course, what we lack critical thinking, fun, love of learning, teamwork, collaboration, and in fact, most competence. Okay, and I think fun and love of learning is an important one because no fun, they're not going to learn. Okay, they should have fun when they learn, and if they have fun, they're going to learn. That's basically what I find. So, what I think we need is a cultural shift for education institutions around the world to really achieve what they are supposed to do, their mission and their learning outcome and their holistic competence. We need a shift in culture in education, okay? Rather than be overshadowed by all these academic knowledge, which is probably not that important. And that is me, and I conclude here. And thank you very much. I know there's some question coming. I have to have a look at it. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Cecilia. That was really interesting presentation, and thank you for sharing your perspective and thought on the topic, and also sharing your Hong Kong experience. At the same time, your personal experience as a tiger mom, but we are very sure that you're also a very, very good mom. No doubt about that. And also thank you for really touching upon this importance of holistic development and what we call it sometimes 21st century skills that the students need to acquire these days. And also at the same time, the happiness, of the children and learners at the end of the day is very, very crucial. So that point is very good. And it was also interesting to see that how the parents, there's so much pressure and expectations for the kids almost as soon as the baby is conceived in the mother's womb. But at the same time, they give so much importance on children's happiness when they choose the kindergarten. So I find it interesting, at the same time, a little bit of a contradicting issue. But then I think it was really a nice presentation. I also, just related to this holistic development and or happiness, I also just want to mention that at UNESCO Bangkok, we do also have a project called Happy School, which really looks into learners' well-being. Which really emphasizes the importance of holistic development of children in general, and also that the projects are run by Mark. So, and we have questions here, but then I think in the interest of time, probably we can move on to the third presentation, and then we come back to the questions that were addressed to you later on. Is that okay with you?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Great. Thank you very much, guys.
Once again, thank you so much. And Dr. Wei Shing, are you ready?
I'm going to turn off my mic now, okay?
Yes, now you can turn off your mic and video. Bye-bye. Talk to you later again.
Let me try to switch over first.
Sure. So while the next presenter is preparing the PowerPoint, I just want to let everyone know that we will share this all PowerPoints through, we'll upload them to our website. And share with you the link. So no need to worry about it. I already saw some questions related to PowerPoint, so just for your information.
Yes, I've just switched over. Could you see it?
Yeah, we can see your PowerPoint now. I think your video might be coming up soon.
Okay. Hello, everyone.
Your video is not there yet.
Okay, I'm just on it.
Leaves, right?
Oh, yes.
Well, I don't know. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, we can see you here. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience. And greetings to all my friends around the world, and also to my friends here in Singapore. And my special thanks, of course, to Nadia and Mark for inviting me to respond to the report. And I hope everyone is comfortable and sipping a coffee and tea somewhere. Like Cecilia, I'm not so comfortable talking to a screen, but I suppose it has some advantages as well. I could organize myself and I could put my cup of tea everywhere. So I hope everyone is comfortable. And what I'm going to do is to just perhaps, first of all, give you a the big picture of what I will be doing. And so I invite everyone to, first of all, think about your own assessment experiences in your country. And I ask this question, whether you think it has been good enough. Yeah. And I think this whole process of reading the report have really helped me to reflect on my assessment experiences. And particularly, I'll talk more about the responses from Singapore as well. You might have heard in the recent news about certain policy shifts in the assessment regimes of our schools in Singapore. And then I'll talk about what I think would be the next steps in talking about assessment in a 21st century kind of a context. So with that, I begin first by saying that you might be thinking that there are perhaps a lot of things that we cannot change because of a particular culture of testing that has existed for a long time. And for some culture, the Chinese culture, this testing culture has gone at least 2,000 years old. So what makes us think that we can actually even change this particular culture? Is it all bad? Is the culture of testing all bad? Or is there something that we could actually harness productively? And if there are indeed negative consequences that we have seen now in this testing culture, what are the things that perhaps we could change to limit these negative consequences? So these takes assessment. Yeah, this takes really wisdom. This takes discernment. And I hope it's with this kind of prayer, in a way, that we can actually think about solutions in trying to think about what to do next for our students in the coming years. So I'm very glad that the report actually cited Bister in mentioning the functions of education, because I think at the heart of this culture of testing is that certain cultures just privilege or emphasize certain function of education. Would it be to help our students to socialize into a particular society? Would it indeed be to help them to be qualified in particular skills and knowledge? Or is it really allowing them to pursue certain happiness that Cecilia talks about as well in her presentation? Do we indeed actually privilege helping students to be happy through education? Or is that indeed not something that is actually emphasized at all? Allowing them to have their own voices, allowing them to have a say in what they want to learn, in even what they have to be assessed in. Yeah. So I will make the argument that as far as the functions of education in East Asia region is concerned, and I have purposefully labeled them in this particular pecking order, that socialization is hugely important. Yeah. And because of this, value systems like respecting of authority, the practicing of diligence, valuing being part of a collective is such a huge thing in many of our countries here. Yeah. And this is followed closely, obviously, by qualification, that we are all asked to have the highest qualification possible in order for us to be socially mobile. Yeah. And the kind of subjectification becomes more of a let's try to achieve as much we can in schools. Personal passion perhaps can wait till later. Yeah. So imagine if this is indeed the kind of pecking order of priorities, are we not surprised that the culture of testing is in that particular way? Can you imagine if the arrow has gone upwards from prioritizing individual pursuits before we talk about qualification and before we talk about socialization? Would that be a different kind of culture that we are actually looking at, that we need to be a little bit more sensitive about? Yeah. So is it not really just about the culture of testing, but the culture of education in general that we are actually seeing here? But going back to the report, I would want to say that there are positive consequences as a result of a particular culture of testing in our society. And first of all, it is the kind of extrinsic motivation in one thing to want to perform well in examination. And that is not a bad thing, because preparing for examination takes discipline and it takes tenacity. And these are important learning orientations that can serve students for life. Of course, an important caveat here is that certain tests and examination could be well designed so that we can really encourage our students to explore beyond the confines of classrooms and school. I can think of tests and examinations that have perhaps coursework or even portfolio elements that really are very helpful sometimes to encourage students to think beyond perhaps just the classroom confines. And obviously, tests and examinations are useful for teachers because they pick up very important benchmarking skills of different types of learning or different standards of learning. And the third point here is that examinations have been an integral of our education and life in Asia Pacific, and teachers, students, parents have accepted it as a valued part of learning and improvement. Thus, I think high-stake examinations may not actually lose their importance in the East Asia region, even if countries like Singapore, where I live in, are trying to reverse this trend. Yeah. Now, the negative consequences, I think, have been very well articulated already in the report. And things like teaching towards the tests, narrowing of curriculum is very, very real. And as a result, the well-being of our students are, I would say, increasingly compromised. Yes. And while it is good to say that a fair system of identifying good performance examination is a wonderful infrastructure that we have set up in our country, it also encourages our students to be only examination smart. So how do we know that students can function in an uncertain future? We all know that the future ahead of us is really very muddy, and we really do not know that somebody who does well in exam and test will really function well in the future. And the last point here is the point of inequality. That we do know that the gap between the top and bottom performers can and will be widening. So what can we do to our education or assessment system that will try to mitigate all these negative consequences? So I'll talk now more about how Singapore will be trying to respond to some of these findings that we have found through not only through the international surveys, but also through our own conversations with our parents of teachers in schools. And as far as I would say 10 years ago, we have been trying to initiate national conversations on how to change a particular kind of mindset or culture of learning within the schools. So you might have heard of this very, very catchy slogan, teach less and learn more. And at the heart of this initiative, which has started more than 10 years ago, is to get everyone to try to re-evaluate the purpose of education. What is the purpose of education in the Singaporean schools today and in the coming days? Is it only for the sake of doing well for the exam? Or is it better to try to get students, parents to appreciate learning in all its complex dimensions? Yeah. So if I could just zoom in on a particular part of this slide, you can see here that as early as 10 years ago, we have been trying to get students, teachers, parents to appreciate, could we do more things on engagement of learning and perhaps less thing on drill and practicing? Yeah, and the word formative assessment have appeared as well. Could there be more formative assessment and less summative assessment? So is a balanced assessment regime indeed something about doing more of something and less of something? So this kind of conversation has taken place for a long time. And I would say that at that point in time, when we initiated this word holistic assessment, so when we initiated this word holistic assessments, it was only located at the lower primary primarily. So in the holistic assessment that started 10 years ago, the Ministry of Education advocated for the tests and exams to be removed in the lower primary. Yes, and Surrounding that policy are a slew of other policy initiatives. For example, getting parents and students to understand what holistic education should look like, and getting teachers to be comfortable with using other kind of assessment tools. At that point in time, we call it bite-sized tools, and also to be more comfortable with using rubrics to give feedback to students and parents. So you can see that it's not only just about removing tests and exams, but it's also about changing certain infrastructure or even reporting students' learning, and also getting the parents to be involved in understanding what holistic development should be like. And in terms of the evaluating of schools, there are very deliberate attempts to try to remove emphasis on grades and the reporting of examination rankings. So there isn't any kind of these rankings anymore, actually, in the schools. Now, moving 10 years ahead, so this conversation took easily 10 years. And at this point in time, in the recent announcements, the ministry has now said that we are ready to actually remove more of these examination and tests at the upper primary levels and even in the secondary school levels. And we think that teachers are also more ready to embrace some of these changes because we have been talking about formative assessment and alternative assessment in the past 10 years in not only primary but secondary school and also in the high school system, all in the spirit of enhancing holistic development of our students. So beneath this seemingly one policy to try to just remove tests and examinations are a set of other policy initiatives to try to, for example, scale up alternative assessment, scaling up the use of alternative assessment, and definitely enhancing the use of formative assessment in the classrooms in the day-to-day context. So I would say beneath all these changes is a growing recognition that we need to have more success, more recognition of different kind of success of learning that is not limited to just being book smart. Yeah. So this slogan, I use this slogan as assessing less for more to try to excite my fellow colleagues in the university and also in schools to see how we can actually really assess less for more. Yeah. So in trying to create space to assess less for more, we are saying that we want more time for regular and constructive feedback to be given to students so that they can use it in their final assessment and even beyond the classrooms. So what is next? So now we're looking at what's next. And I have all these questions that I have been thinking about quite a while. Can certain social cultural values be changed? Yeah. My take is that probably no. Yeah. And is that a pessimistic kind of outlook? I don't think so, because I think certain things really require time to change. Yeah. As for the next questions, can our society recognize wider indicators of success of learning beyond the conventional qualifications? I would say not immediately, but we can do something by showing what are some of the alternative pathways of success that we have already witnessed in our society. There are plenty of people who do not have qualifications, who are not book smart, who are not exam smart, but they are doing wonderfully well in their lives. So why is that possible? Can our teachers, students, parents know enough of the value of formative and alternative assessments? I would say it is not an easy thing, but this is something we can do. And this is something I'm trying to do in the Teachers College. We have only one Teachers College in Singapore, and because of this, we do carry the heavy responsibility of trying to get our teachers to understand the value of formative and alternative assessments in the school system. Yeah, and because we have very active interaction with our colleagues in schools and also in the ministries, we can try to help our teachers to be as skillful as they can be in using formative and alternative assessments. Now, the last question I think is very important. Do you think our students can be assisted to pick up self-regulation skills for the test of life, rather than to be discouraged by a life of perpetual testing? And my answer to that is yes, it is very possible. especially for the teachers in the classrooms. They have all the agency and authority to get the students to be able to pick up very important self-regulation skills. And what are these self-regulation skills? And these self-regulation skills have already been nurtured in our testing culture, I believe. And this includes the things that I've said in the left-hand side here. But we are also very mindful that there are the dangers of over-testing that will lead to students being led down the road of misregulations. And you can see all these things here under the misregulations are the undesirable skills that could be picked up if there had been undesirable over-testing or even use of tests and examination that are just not developmentally appropriate for the students. Now, what is the assessment of in 21st century that is good enough? I think we can safely say that we are not very happy with many of our assessments that are appearing within our current culture. And my take is this, that yes, while the standardization and ensuring that summative assessment are designed well are still very important and it will remain important, but we need to understand that this is only indicative of a very limited dimension of learning, especially if you think about it in a long-term kind of perspective. There's therefore no need to overly emphasize certain precision in getting certain marks right to even the last decimal points, perhaps. Yeah? Second point, now if we can recognize that wider set of competencies cannot be easily accessed in school-based or national examinations, then we will start to realize the importance of formative and alternative assessment that can help students acquire lifelong learning orientations. How do we, for instance, help students to appreciate their failures and strength of learning in a day-to-day context so that they will try to make the best use of every learning opportunities, even in the adversity of encountering difficult tests and examination at a certain point in their life? And the last point is this. We need to ask ourselves, are we systematically disadvantaging a particular group of students by relying on a particular regime of assessment? Is there room to research on differentiated and developmentally appropriate assessment for different students? If we do believe in student-centered teaching and learning, surely there must be this thing called student-centered assessment as well. So with that, I think we can say that we are trying to reach back into this particular classical definition of assessment, which really is to sit beside somebody to assist. So if you look back at your own assessment experiences, do you think that assessment has actually been like this? Yeah. And coming to the 21st century, I believe assessment itself is a 21st century skills, just because of what I think Bolt and Ficklekoff have talked about it, that we need to think about assessment as a very important set of skills to help students to make difficult, complex judgments, not only about their work currently, but also in future. And so with that, I thank you for your attention and I welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Weishin, for sharing again for another very interesting presentation and sharing your reactions and point of view on the study, and also at the same time sharing a Singaporean case, what's happening in the country.
Thank you.
I just realized we are running a little over time, and yet we have many questions that are coming up. So maybe we can now, let's say, open the floor to the question and answer sessions, open the floor to everyone by going to the question and answer session. If you can.
Okay, let me just remove myself, sorry.
Okay. If you can upload one presentation. Oh, my presentation again. Introduction. This is it.
Number two.
Number two.
So before the webinar, we received some questions. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, so before the webinar, in the registration form, probably you've seen, there was this field where anyone was able to pose their questions in advance so that we can share with the speakers during the webinar and get the response. Yeah, we put some, but at the same time, I see we have so many questions flowing in. So I will do a mix of both so that I think everyone feel like the questions being addressed to some extent. But to the questions that we probably won't be able to respond due to time limit or other reasons, we will definitely get back to you after the webinar. We'll get the written response from the speakers and get back to you on that. So my first question, actually, the attendee's first question will probably go to us, mainly to Mark, saying how can our students get rid of this exam-oriented learning? What strategy can UNESCO suggest in this regard?
Thank you, Nadia. So for the first question, it's interesting that we focus on students to get rid of the exam-oriented learning. For example, you could create a student movement to lobby against teachers, schools, governments, etc., to change the education system. But that would take a lot of time and effort for a student movement to create. But perhaps the question is sort of more in general talking, how can we, as a society, as a culture, education systems in general, get rid of exam-oriented learning, and what can UNESCO suggest in this regard? I think I highlighted some of those suggestions in the report itself, and also Dr. Chan and Dr. Wei Xin also reiterated some of this. Is transitioning to a holistic education system, placing less focus on using standardized examinations as a foundation of what we want our education system to be, would be one thing. So focusing on more balance between using examinations and tests, which can be positive and can be good, as we've seen from all three of our talks, but then we want to limit the negative aspects of these standardized tests. So trying to find that balance between what we need to use for content and what we need to use for life skills and promoting holistic education and well-being. Thank you.
Thank you. So our next question will go to Dr. Cecilia. If everyone can see this text box, the chat area on the Skype, you'll probably see the question I'm going to read. Dr. Cecilia, I hope you're listening and still connected.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, if what employers are looking for are 21st century competencies and leadership skills and good virtue, why do schools still put so much emphasis on testing that assess knowledge and cognitive skills? Is it because we don't have assessment modes to measure those skills? Or how do we ensure the objectivity, validity, and reliability of the results of such assessments? Yes.
Okay.
Over to you, Doctor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Everyone can hear me?
Okay,
great.
Okay.
Okay. I do think that we are not thinking out of the box, right? I mean, in fairness, a lot of the people who are making the policy, changes are people like ourselves who are researchers and scholars in universities, okay? And we are probably bound by this framework. And I was actually mentioning this to a lot of universities who came visit last week. And we're not thinking out of the box. We are bound by this framework. When we say we want to create a curriculum, we're still thinking about curriculum in a box, basically. So basically, we, if someone is asking me, why are we still doing this? Well, because we are old-fashioned. That's probably it. We're old-fashioned. We haven't able to jump out from that box yet. Okay, and that's number one reason. Yes, we haven't actually found any fantastic way in terms of assessing competency. But although I'm getting there, I'm researching. I'm researching on the assessment of generic competence. So I'm getting there. I'm starting to have something. But let me ask you. The question is, right, when it is kind of like, it's back to kind of the catch-22. Is if we give anything else to our employers, if our employers is if they're used to looking at a grade and a mark, okay, so they know 100% means good, they know 4.3, 4.4 and GPA is good, they know A's are good, right? So you need to change their mindset. You need them to be buying the whole idea that it is not going to be a grade in the future, because testing is a grade. It's a measurement of one single digit, right, or double digit or triple digit, but basically it's a grade as a whole. And unless employer, when they are ready to look at other things other than a grade, we haven't able to change yet. And if I'm maybe that's one other thing is like, I don't think testing is totally bad, right? I think there are situations that we do need testing, but does it have to be wholly like high stake testing? I don't think so. And I think Dr. Leung mentioned some good method there, it needs to be a combination. It does need to be a combination. It have to be quantitative and qualitative, okay? And as I mentioned before, you do not assess your friend, based on a test on their competence. You assess them based on what they're like. Oh, you like that person, because he have he have good humor, he is leader, whatever it is, right? But you don't judge them by a test. So I think it's something that we need to work on in terms of that.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. The next question is to Dr. Wei Xing. I hope you're still there.
Okay.
Question is again.
Yep, here.
The question is still in the also again you can see it in the text box, chat box. Is it too simplistic to view all assessment in the same way? There will be some comparatively outdated assessment approaches, but also more practical and relevant assessment approaches which offer more scope for positive learning. And please.
Well, yeah. Well, I certainly think that there are many types of assessments. And when we use the word test, right? So when we use the word test, typically is referring to a particular kind of instrument that is standardized and is typically through a pen and paper kind of tests or methods. But there are, by now, we know there are many different ways of assessing students that may not rely on just a test. If you talk, I mentioned just now about portfolio, I mentioned just now about coursework assessment. These are all quite prevalent in certain subjects like art and music. So certain disciplines are already using these alternative assessment quite prevalently. I can think about art and music, design technology, and these subjects I think have been depending on these alternative assessments. And moving forward, I think there's a place for students to have this role of self-assessing themselves too. So if we can be comfortable with getting students to self-assess themselves and letting them having a voice in that process, I think that will be even better.
Yeah, okay, thank you. The next question, I will then address it to Mark, saying if there are no examination in the classroom, then what will be its alternative?
Thank you. Simply would be observation, I believe. A simplistic question is just saying if we eliminated all examinations, then we would have to have some of the qualitative methods that Dr. Wei Xin and Cecilia were talking about, based on observations. For example, when we meet our friends or when you're going to apply for a job, all of these are observations based on contact with other people, based on how we speak, based on the way we act. So if we're not having an examination, then that would be the method. And obviously, there's many different ways to structure those observations, different rubrics, and different tools that we can use to look at those observations. However, I don't think that's what any of us are suggesting in what we're saying here. There is a time and a place for examinations or for tests. Some content, we're going to have to continue to use simple pen and paper or question answers to evaluate that. But there's a lot of these skills and competencies that may be more valuable to our lives once we leave school, that seem to be being passed by in traditional high-stakes exams. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The next question, maybe to Dr. Cecilia. It's good result of the student based on delivery of teaching material. If there's a lack of assessment system for the teachers to acknowledge their competencies, then how are we going to test the children's competencies?
Sorry. Sorry, you said good result of the student based on delivery of teaching material. There's a lack of assessment system for teacher to acknowledge their competence. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. If there's a lack of assessment system for teachers to acknowledge their competencies, then how are we going to test the children's competencies?
Yeah, I think everybody is actually worried about, if we don't use tests, what are we going to do? I think that's basically the consensus of the questions that are coming. Dr. Learn already mentioned a few, right? And I think he's right. Self-assessment and peer assessment is important because that's how we do things in general. We use self-assessment all the time. You might not realize it, but you do, right? And peer assessment is also another very useful way, either by the teachers, either by the students themselves, because they learn better when they see, how they made a mistake from each other, okay? And I mean, we do presentation. A lot of the time we ask students to communicate, to present in front of us, and sometimes if they're standing in front of the classroom and present, they might not see themselves, doing the things wrong, but the other person would. The peers sitting there and go, oh, he is like twiddling his feet all the time. He's stuttering all the time, and until you see other people doing it, you might not realize it yourself, And I think that's why peer assessment is a great way. And it's actually to do with self-regulation, management, and loads of those as well. One of the things I do want to mention is that, apart from assessment, the other part of it is really important. There are two parts. One is feedback, which Dr. Leung mentioned, feedback. Getting good feedback, constructive feedback is very important. And it can be by anybody. It could be by a teacher, it could be by parents, it could be by a friend. In fact, these days with the whole cultural and social, I think a friend's feedback is probably more valuable than a teacher. As in, they probably listen to their friends more than they would listen to their parents and their teachers. And I know from first-hand experience. In terms of, apart from feedback, the other thing is reflection. Now, I think that's a really important thing. If we don't reflect, okay, they're not going to learn, okay? So you have an assessment. When you finish your assessment, you go. That's no good. So we need feedback, right? We all know that. But after the feedback, if we don't reflect on it, where did I go wrong? Why did I do that? It's either because of academic knowledge or for competence. Either way, you need to reflect, And then, of course, if there's opportunity to redo the whole cycle again, that would be fantastic. So I do believe that if we want to build in something, we need to build in reflection and feedback, and that should be part of the whole assessment. Okay? And rather we have a better system in terms of competence, we need everybody to go aboard. I saw somebody mention that how do we, become the catalyst, right? And teachers, schools, and to change policy maker. Sounds like a uproar is coming. But I don't think that's what we need. I think we all need to sit down and think about, get people on board. How do we do it to get people on board to change the culture? I think that's what we need. Thanks, Lydia. Back to you.
Thank you. Then the next question, I believe it was to Dr. Wei Shen. Is testing only a cultural phenomenon? Or is it also due to other factors such as lack of space in higher education or inequality in society, etc.? Can we relate the findings of the survey to the context in different countries? By survey, it's the study maybe. But yes, please go ahead.
Well, I think there are many different reasons why testing culture is what it is today. And certainly it has got to do with limited space in the university. Perhaps it got to do with the fact that certain career pathways are just more prestigious than the other, and therefore parents are forcing the students or their child to take out certain subjects and also to vie for the limited space for that particular kind of profession and things like that. And because these are all interconnected in some certain ways, the conversations cannot end with, can we just remove tests and exams in schools? It cannot be such a short-sighted kind of solutions. So that's why in Singapore, when we talk about removing or recalibrating the kind of test system in schools, the conversation definitely involves not just only the mainstream schools, but it also involves university partners, and it definitely involves our professional partners at the workplaces. So there are, for example, conversations about, can we rely less on test and examination grades even to get into universities? And this is something that we are working very actively on right now, that this kind of systemic change has to be enacted systemically. It cannot be just a school or even a classroom thing. So the whole culture, the whole society needs to raise our child in a way that is coherent. Yeah, so that's I think the point here is that it cannot be a piecemeal kind of initiative.
Okay, thank you. We have here so many actually questions that are coming up, and that's also some of them were well prepared in advance. But then I think in the interest of time, we will just do one more round, the final round of question answer, posing one question to each speakers, and we'll end the session. So one final question to you, Mark. That the question that came prior to the webinar was, the government in many countries where international tests such as PISA and TIMSS are not conducted are encouraged to implement them. This is further likely to boost the local culture of the exam-driven education system. What can be done to make these governments focus on quality rather than placing importance on international tests?
Thank you, Nadia. I guess the first thing is there's often a misunderstanding of the purpose of these international tests. A lot of people wanting to join them see them as a chance to showcase their education system and to compare it against other countries and to say our education system is doing well, or it's doing better than our neighbors, or we're teaching our students this and this and this, simply to get the higher ranking. So this goes back to this competition-driven placement and achievement that we were talking about before. But a lot of these tests are actually intended to improve the education systems within those countries. It's there to provide evidence of the education system, the gaps that they can identify through those tests, and how to improve them. A lot of countries that join these then do not have, or in some cases do not have the capacity in order to utilize this evidence in order to make those improvements, and therefore just fall back on showcasing their ranking or their position. And so what needs to be done is clearly making sure that these governments understand the purpose of these are intended to help them improve their education systems. And that can then lead to improved capacity in utilizing this evidence. And in fact, this is exactly what NEQMAP does here at UNESCO Bangkok, and maybe Nadia wants to add a couple more words on this.
No, I think also one of the reasons, how to say, many countries are going for PISA or TIMSS as international assessment is because I think there's a lack of understanding on what the test assessment is actually, what this assessment is for, how to say, as an origin. Especially, there's a big disconnect. We noticed that there's a big disconnect between within the countries among technical experts who are mainly in charge of implementing or conducting assessment in the country versus the ones who are at the higher level, meaning our policymakers. And at many times we get a comment saying from the technical expert saying that we do this and they understand the purpose and why they're doing the assessment, not because of the ranking purpose, but more improving the learning of students, improving the quality of teaching and learning. However, then it cannot be translated into policy eventually. That's because there's, I think, there's a limited understanding at the higher level on the real purpose and the meaning on the test. So I think one of the things as UNESCO Bangkok through NEQMAP we've been trying to planning to do is actually to organize a regional level forum on the topic, particularly inviting this high level officials, to bring it, and with an hope and with an aim to enhance the understanding of what actually test or examination is for, or examination or assessment actually is for. It's not just about ranking, but it's more than that. So I think that's just the point that I was I was thinking to raise it. Thank you, Mark. So maybe a final question to Dr. Cecilia. Hello, Dr. Cecilia?
Hiya.
Yeah. So it says, you mentioned a while back about the culture shift. Would you mind sharing us a concrete example on this matter, the culture shift?
Yes, I see people were talking about cultural shifts. I think we are concentrating too much on academic knowledge, right? And you guys must have seen the YouTube videos about that. We don't know what jobs are out there in 2030s. We don't know, what kind of subject we should be teaching in 2030s. A lot of the things that we will be teaching and, jobs-wise will be obsolete. We know that, right? So here we are spending a lot of time teaching academic knowledge, and testing them is probably not a very good idea, So, and that's why I said cultural shift. It should be shift more to the holistic components, right? As you mentioned before, when you introduced me, or Maki introduced me, I'm doing a lot of things on assessment and development of holistic competence, right? And we know that children and students these days are very different. Their mentality is different. They don't want to do, they don't want a full-time job, right? These days, teenager, graduates, they don't want a full-time job. They want to retire by the age of 35, 40. Okay, and what they actually want to do is they want to retire maybe for a few years, and then they go back to work when they're in 50s, because they don't see the reason why you retire. Why is the word retire or retirement should be stuck with age? Okay, why can't they retire earlier? And this is what I mean when we are stuck in that mind frame, right? We are so used to do something that we are used to do it. Okay. And the other thing is, right, they don't want a permanent job while we used to crave for them, right? In university, tenure job, fantastic. They don't want a tenure job. They want a job which they do a few hours a day, and then they can go off and do their own thing. That's what they want, okay? And I think that, if we want to shift, we need to shift our mind. The policymaker need to shift our mind. I mean, we are doing that in Hong Kong. I mean, the government have been putting in a lot of effort, a lot of funding into teaching and learning, okay, for us to change things, to do innovative assessment, to do different active learning, experiential learning, and so forth. And my university have changed. I've been here for over 10 years now. Other universities in Hong Kong and my university have been changing. The way we're doing things are a little bit different than before, And we do tests. I mean, before we have a policy that it must be 20% is only allowed formative and 80% is exams, right? But now it's changed. There is no set number. I mean, if some of our courses in programs, 100% continuous assessment. Okay, 100%, and they are actually innovative assessment. You could be doing a video and role play and stuff like that. So things are changing. So if you talk about in terms of culture shift, I think it needs to be baby step. It does, and then baby step, and then go forward. Thank you, Lydia. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Celia. The last question to Dr. Vishen. So there was a mention of the need for revolution in assessment. So where would the stimulus for such revolution come from? Who would drive it?
Can you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's also in the text box. If you can see, there was mention of the need for revolution in assessment. And where would the stimulus for such revolution come from? Who would drive it?
Okay. Well, I think, well, at least in Singapore, the main drivers for any kind of policy change has to come from our central government, which is actually the Ministry of Education for us. So, but I would say that more and more, the kind of change that needs to happen is a combination of top-down and bottom-up. So while the government has set certain direction for change, it needs to involve the teachers, the parents, the wider society to embrace and to acknowledge that these changes need to happen. And so I mentioned just now that it took us 10 years to reach kind of a consensus of what a holistic assessment could look like. And I dare say there are still a lot of questions, there are still a lot of resistance, there are still things that are not right. And we are definitely not resting our laurels on our high PISA and TIM scores, because I don't think those scores really mean very much to us at all. So I would think that behind the scene of all these rankings is to look at what are the processes of learning that we want to emphasize. And this has been highlighted by Mark and Cecilia already. What are the processes of learning that we do want to privilege, and we want assessment to, in a way, to be somewhat aligned to what these learning and teaching that are happening, not only in the classrooms, but in the everyday lives. Would that work?
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Vishen. So I think with this, we will conclude the webinar officially. Within the time, we try to address as many questions as possible, but I know there are many more questions that haven't been addressed. But as I mentioned earlier, we will definitely circulate these questions to the three speakers and get the response to, and probably send you or share with you the written response in a week time or so. So with this, I would like to again thank for our three speakers for joining us today to share your thoughts and experience on this particular topic, which is obviously, I can see it's very, very interesting, which is why many people are actively participating. Wow, someone is watching a movie. Mission Impossible is that? Yeah, and yeah, of course, also thank you for all the participants for your active participation and questions, comments. It was very interesting. So here, I also would like to remind everyone that we will share the PowerPoints from all the three presentations with you all. And at the same time, we did a video recording of this webinar. So we will also upload it, we'll clean it up, upload it on the website and share with you the link so that whoever wasn't able to join today, you can share with your colleagues who were not able to join with us today. And finally, I just want to say that if anyone is interested in the receiving a hard copy of the report, which Mark is showing, Maki-san is also showing. If you're interested in receiving the hard copy of this particular report, you can send us your request by sending an email to the NEQMAP Secretariat, which I think you already know. So then we will be able to send you. Also, when you express your interest, please send us your postal address so that we can send you the hard copy of the report. So I guess this is it from my end.
Yeah, no, thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Wei Shin. Thank you, Cecilia. Very happy to hear your thoughts on this topic, and thank you, everyone, for joining the webinar. I guess that's the word we use, joining, logging in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much for joining. Thank you, and thank you for inviting me.
Yeah,
thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, Vishen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was very knowledgeable.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.